Some highlights of the American leader's state visit to Britain. The president puts his hand up the skirt of the number 10 tea lady, causing a furious prime minister to respond with a speech warning the Yanks to stop pushing around the Brits. You can tell it must be a movie because while there have been presidents capable of goosing the domestics, no real PM would ever dare be that rude to the US. These fantasies occur in Love Actually, which sees Richard Curtis, writer of Four Weddings and a Funeral and Notting Hill, making his first film as writer-director. Curtis's subject has always been diffident English people suddenly struck by passion. But even by his standards, Love Actually has Cupid sending out for extra darts. 9 separate romances reach a climax on Christmas Eve. Julie Myerson, 9 romantic comedies in one. Was this film the one for you?
I thought I was going to really hate it because he does a very bad thing. There's a reference to September the 11th and the phone calls people made to their loved ones in, I think, like the first few sentences. And it is so gratuitous. Not because you can't mention September the 11th in the film, but because he uses it as a shortcut to our emotions. And I found that so manipulative. I have to say, although the film continues to be manipulative, I loved almost every other minute of it. I think if you look at it closely, it falls apart. But I'm not sure that matters. I did actually enjoy it very much.
Tom Paulin, it's what they call a portmanteau romance, which means it's like one of those restaurants where sushi goes round on a conveyor belt. So if you don't like one plot, there's another one along, another 8 along, in fact. What did you make of it?
Well, I thought, it's a Christmas movie. I thought I'd be like Scrooge if I didn't like it. I enjoyed it, watched it in a cinema packed with young people eating popcorn. They were laughing away and giggling. It is a very good Elton John joke and a terrific catering manager joke, which I thought was really intelligent, and I loved it. And I loved the whole sort of pro-America theme, but anti-George Bush theme. And it's sort of Forrest Gumpery, where you felt, it was representing merry England, decent country, everybody goes to the local comprehensive, class divisions don't matter, part of old Europe. The Portuguese theme, Colin Firth and the Portuguese young woman.
Well, it's hardly a theme. He falls in love with the Portuguese cleaning lady, Tom.
Ancient ally of this country, goes back centuries.
You think Richard Curtis intended that
reference,
I think
so, yeah.
And I thought it was
interesting.
history.
She wasn't French, she wasn't German, she wasn't Spanish, she wasn't Italian, Portuguese. And there was just some kind of ancient tradition there, little tiny joke.
It was for much more practical reasons. He needs no one in the audience to understand the language he speaks, and therefore it had to be Portuguese.
Right.
I fear. Tim Lott, this is a very Richard Curtis England in which men, when they're upset, bang their heads against the wall, which I've never actually seen outside of a Richard Curtis movie. Wandsworth is long streets of Mews cottages and so on.
It's more than a Richard. It's actually a vision of England in some ways, at least in psychological profile, from 30 years ago. The men in this film are like carry-on heroes. They're like Kenneth Connor, actually. They reminded me most particularly of this stumbling, bumbling, inarticulate, perpetually embarrassed, sexually repressed fools, which I actually found quite offensive. And I thought when this film was going to come out, this is very bitterly ironic for me in a way, because I thought, because I love Richard Curtis films, I've enjoyed all of them immensely, and I thought, when this film, when this, I love Notting Hill, and when this film came out, I thought, so they're going to put it on Newsnight, and some miserable old cynic is going to sort of go on about with a load of rubbish, and it's me, because I sat there with a little knot of something in my stomach, which I think was nausea, or possibly sickness or bile. There were 2 people sitting next to me who didn't stop laughing all the way through this film, but they were Japanese and they couldn't understand a word, and I could understand that reaction if you can't understand a word. But I mean, watching it was one of the most unpleasant and over-sweetened. It's like eating 8 chocolates.
From the miserable and simple side of the sofa.
Emma Thompson is wonderful in it, I think.
Well, that's the one plot line with some pain. Let's talk about this, Julie.
I just think, it's funny what Tim said about the men, because the women, what I think was very lazy, they could so easily have remedied this, is the men are politicians, novelists, they run companies. The women, OK, one tea lady is fine. A tea lady, a Portuguese maid and a housewife.
He patronises everybody,
He patronises everyone. But he doesn't. I did have to examine why I was enjoying this film, because I laughed all the way through it, and yet actually so many of these plots, tiny little plots, have no space to develop.
No, it's far too
Laura
crowded.
Linney, do we know why? Because she's been in love with someone for 2 years. She finally is kissing them on the bed after the office party, and she answers her phone enough times to end the relationship.
It has to have some
do we believe
rooting
that?
in reality,
No, I
however
don't
much of a
think so.
fantasy it is. There has to be some foot in reality there.
But for some
And
reason,
Yeah,
it
and there
didn't
was an
matter.
absurd.
No, hang on. Look,
floats
can
in
we
fantasy
talk about this? It
in
does matter, doesn't it? This level of sentimentality. So, for example, we have one of the 9 storylines is set in the porn industry, where the people are healthy and sweet and lovely. Now, if you watch any of the 18 recent documentaries on Channel 4 about the porn business, they're just not like that.
Yeah.
And everything in Richard Curtis, there's a storyline which is effectively about a stalker, but he turns out to be a really, really nice stalker who lets the woman go back to her husband, and it's so unreal.
The
I mean, that
porn
does
thing
matter,
didn't
doesn't it?
work. The other one that didn't work was there's a young man who goes off to some other country. It's America, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absurd.
He
Yeah.
managed
And again,
apparently to get 3 amazing women into bed.
4, in fact. I mean,
All in
he
one
couldn't
go,
stop
yes.
at 1.
But you see, I think the film it's a
extraordinary
very
enough.
slick film. It gets away with it because he moves so swiftly on to the next joke, which is usually quite a good joke. There are some very good jokes in this film. It's very funny.
But it's
but you're right,
I
it
laughed
doesn't
twice
work.
in the entire film.
No, there are some very funny jokes, but look, even if we assume a lot of people loved the earlier films, now, people who love those, and Tim is one of them, so we have some evidence here, there is a feeling among some people that he's taken this as far as it can go, that actually this is too concocted,
Well,
too
it's
sentimental.
badly
Tom.
filmed, and there's a sort of bleached, untidy look to it. And they're all very badly dressed and scruffy looking, and it doesn't work really.
There's one really,
like the clothes.
one really interesting
criticism.
one really interesting scene, particularly to talk about this week, which is where the British Prime Minister, played by Hugh Grant, he stands up Downing Street next to the American president, and
Brilliant.
he says, "We're not going to be kicked around." Now, what did you make of that scene?
Well,
Tom?
I thought it's interesting. I mean, normally it would have been out on a Friday. I saw it in Oxford. It was out on Thursday, on the exact day the demonstration was happening, and that made it extraordinarily topical and political. While at the same time it was, full of good feelings and so on. But I thought there was a sort of political stringency at times to it that was interesting.
Well, they enjoyed the slickness. We felt a certain sickness on this side of the sofa. But Love Actually, certificate 15, is absolutely everywhere from today.